I've been looking at doing that. Some of my friends do that. So let's see. Hey, there we go. Now let's make sure I mute that. There we go. All right. So technical issues. That's how YouTube is. Okay, so yeah, you can't see it on your phone right now, so it's just me on there, and I'll bring you in just a half a second. Thanks everybody for joining me today. We have Pastor David Foster from the oh, I even wrote this down. It's the Rock Hope Baptist Church in Edmonton, Washington. He's on with us today to talk about evidence for God. First, we have some questions, and then we'll get into that. And if you guys in the chat have any questions, at the end, we'll go ahead and make some time for that, as long as we do have the time to spare. The purpose of this project, the interview with the pastor project, is to go out and seek evidence for God. If if you're content to just reject claims of God, then that's fine. But if you care about the question, if you care about getting the answer to the question, does God exist? Then it is necessary for you to go out and seek evidence. One way to do that is to talk to people who who teach God does definitely exist. And so, with that, let's bring in Pastor David. Can I call you Pastor David, or is it better as Pastor Foster?
You can just call me Dave, man.
Call you
Whatever
Dave.
it's called.
Actually, that's my first son's name is David.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah,
great names. Welcome me. Musical love it. I have been.
that's awesome. I forgot what the names mean sometimes. Like
Yeah.
so. So these questions here, they could be your position or your ministry's position or both. Whatever works best for you. So I promise I did have them in order, and then I erased the order. So what's your position? What's your church's position on like LGBTQ, gay marriage, that kind of thing? Are they allowed in the church? Or are they?
Well, first of all, Jake, thanks for letting me join you in your YouTube channel there. Appreciate that very much. Yeah, we are at Rock of Hope Church, Edmonton, Washington, so appreciate that. Nice to be here with you. In regard to LGBTQ, there's probably a denominational approach, and then there's a church approach, and then there's my approach. And sometimes they interlink and sometimes not. My approach is to love everybody, and everyone is welcome in my home, house, and in my heart. And they are welcome in the church as well. We have individuals in our church. In fact, when I was pastoring at the Anchor, we had a gay man on our eldership board. So, so that was a different thing. Now, I would say my denomination doesn't hold to that. They would not be that open. Our church is very open to people coming, but there's deeper questions as to what level of leadership you might ask about, and are there levels of that? Of course, every church varies. But my wife and I, we've got gay and lesbian and transgender friends, and we've been in our home Christmas, and we love it. I do community theater, and can't do community theater without a lot of gay friends. Let me say that.
Thank you. I should have started this portion with. Do you have anything additional you'd like to add, or speak about your ministry before we continue the questions?
Well, I appreciate that. When I came to Edmonds, about 50% of the population was over the age of 55, and the rest of them were people groups. So when I came to be a pastor, I kind of launched a vision to reach all the people groups. And so now we've got 9 different congregations of 6 different languages, and open it up to all peoples. We've got 6 different languages: Chuukese, Korean, Filipino, Ethiopian. Pretty exciting just to be a little picture of all humanity functioning together. So that's really the heartbeat of our ministry, is a partnership model with different language groups. Pretty good.
That, that's really nice to have so many different people together. Uh, I had what is? Did you say the first language was Chuukese?
Yeah, it's the Isle of Truk. It's in Micronesia area, about 5,000 miles probably due east of Australia. So, middle of nowhere.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm sure I've heard that before. I do remember hearing the Isle of Truck before.
Okay, yes. Hmm.
Just it's one of those parts of the mind, that the schema that's way back there. I'll remember hearing it, but I would.
Gosh. Yeah, they're beautiful.
One thing that I like to say is that you have no empathy for those you don't know. As familiarity grows, so does your empathy. Now, as humans, we kind of like create this model, this image of people from the other side of the world that we don't really have any knowledge of. But by creating that image of them, we kind of build a little bit of empathy for them, so we can build that on its own. And it's important to get out there, meet people you don't know, meet people who are different than you, look different than you, think different than you, different faith, all that, and build that empathy for everybody. So it sounds like you're doing that right there with, you said 9 congregations?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
The idea was that there were these people gatherings, like 15,000 Koreans within a 5-minute drive radius. There's 5,000 Hispanics and 4,500 Filipinos. They had no place to worship. They had no churches, so we'd gather together and meet somebody. Maybe we've actually started some of the churches with just one individual, and they've grown. But for me, it was, yeah, is there a place for them to worship God? But I'm not really much about groups as I am about people. So I just try to look people in the eye and have a conversation. And as we get to know each other, then their vision is beautiful to me. It's not my vision, it's not my idea. It's just if I get to know a person individually, I get excited about what's on their heart.
Awesome. I didn't put this in my list, but that reminded me of, what are you guys doing about the masks, the COVID situation? Are you guys doing all online? Are you switching to do part and part, or how's that working for you guys?
Yeah, well, I wrote a document for our entire denomination, kind of working through this, dealing with the CDC and working with our governor on what they were doing in the face. And that document went out to all of our churches, and kind of the whole, each church has to do what they want to do. But for ours and all the congregation with us, we kind of went with a fourfold program of honor. We're honoring our government, we're honoring the authorities, we're honoring our governor, and we follow the protocols of what the governor stated. We're now in phase 2. We'll be moving back in Snohomish County back to phase 1. Who knows what's going to happen there? But we've got masks on, Purell when you come through the door, 6-foot protocol, 25% capacity, and we started streaming right away when they shut everything down. Now the church isn't in a building; the church is outside the building, so we never stopped having church. We are always the church everywhere we go. But we started streaming, and I'll tell you, it's been pretty great to just see who we can reach. And a lot of my friends who would never step into a church are kind of following and watching, and that's been kind of a new experience. And I'm excited about it. But we follow all the protocol.
I appreciate that, especially in the wake of certain other church bodies who, you may have heard about the Catholic Church. I forget specifically which one, but they're doing the communion off the one spoon for the whole congregation. Yeah.
Crazy, man. No, we worked out the media pretty well, man. It's a step up. You 6-foot protocol. Grab your thing. Move over here. No one's touching anything. You take it silently. We did all of that. No problem. It's kind of crazy. I'm in Boise right now. They've gone from phase 4 back to phase 3. No one's wearing masks here, man. I came here to see my 95-year-old grandmother,
Oh,
95-year-old mother, and I went to a restaurant to pick up some food. Nobody's got masks on. It's crazy.
I got my Seahawks one,
There you go.
and then I have 2 other ones that normally I wear the other 2. They got BLM, Black Lives Matter, written across it.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Hey, Jake, I'm convinced this entire COVID thing was drummed up by the NFL because the XFL was making a little bit of headway. I don't want to drag it away, man.
that's good. I like that.
Well,
Oh man. So Um, so many things, like so many stories that just pop into my head. Just like, I think I'll move on to the next question there. It's kind of tied to the first one we were talking about, is your position on marriage for like the gay community, the LGBT community. Do you guys perform those marriages at your church? Do you support them? Even if doctrinally it may not be what the
Yeah, that's been real sensitive thing. A very dear couple of ours, and actually a lesbian couple who've been friends for many years. Love them dearly. They asked me to do their ceremony, and it was interesting because one of the gals really wanted me to, and the other one didn't believe in marriage. So, but denominationally, they would not go for gay marriage. Our church probably not go for gay marriage. Myself, I'm under authority. I'm under the authority of obviously the church I'm with, the denomination I'm with. I'm also under the authority of what I'm a very strong biblical person. We can talk about that as you want to get into sacred literature. But my take on the scripture is that I could not do it. So when they asked me, man, my heart was great. I do believe we live in a secular nation, and we have civil rights for all people, and civil unions are great, and I support that 100%. And when it comes to marriage, government can say what they want to say and do what they want to do, and I'm all for it. But I could not do that because I'm under the authority of what I believe in the scripture and the church I'm serving in. They understood that. They love me for that. Gay friends love me for that. But, love is love.
okay. So, based on the word, based on the Bible and the church, it was something that you weren't able to do, even if emotionally you felt connected to them.
Well, emotionally, I'm totally connected to beautiful friends of mine. Totally, absolutely.
So, another thing that comes up a lot in the online debate sector is atheism. How do you define the word? Personally, how when you hear atheist, what does that mean to you? What does the word mean?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, linguistically, a meaning on or off or out. Theism, theist, the study of God. So it's basically a no God. That's what the word actually means. Functionally and relationally, I found individuals who are across the spectrum, whether they were pagans, and I have dear friends who are pagans, Satanists, and I have friends who are Satanists, and those who are just secular philosophical atheists. So each one has their own reason, whether it's cosmology or evolution or whatever. So it's too broad of a spectrum. You might as well use the word New Age. What does that mean? Use it. Are you lighting candles? Are you hugging trees? Haven't decided what you are. You listen to Anya all day long. So it's pretty. It's one of those words of atheist. You really got to know the person where they're standing. For me, it's a person that has come to the conclusion that there's not a prime cause. There's not an individual or even non-personality engaged in pre-existence, and that seems to be the word man. Whether it's because they're angry, because the church has failed them, somebody who was calling themselves a Christian was brutal, and so they said that's not for me. There are a lot of people who are, I believe, atheists out of pain. There are a lot of people who are atheists because they believe in macroevolution and believe the tales of macroevolution are true all the way and don't want to represent anything. There are many of them who are, I think, because it's just never experienced supernatural. I got a lot of friends who are atheists who just say, I've never experienced anything that is out of the normal. And so I can't say across the board why people are atheists. Everybody's got their own story. I'm happy to hear it.
Excellent. Yeah, they're
Maybe that resonates with you, but that's what I found.
um, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. One thing that probably the next thing I was thinking of saying is that you have to, however somebody defines themselves, the word is just a shortcut to what they mean, and especially with polysemous words or words that have a lot of meanings or a lot of usages, you really have to dig deeper than that. But I think growing up, what I always heard it to mean in church was someone who believes there is no God, flat out. versus what a lot of the new atheists tend to say is, or at least the online sphere, a lot of them tend to say it's equivalent to lack theism, a lack of a belief in God. And there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of range in between the two, and a lot of reasons. People have good reasons, and people have terrible reasons for theism or non-theism. So,
Every personal reason is personal, and I don't know that I call it. I understand the word terrible. If someone's got a heart issue with it, they've got their own reasons. Okay, I like your nomenclature there, lack theism. That's almost a blend between agnostic and atheistic. I like that.
yeah, yeah. There's some people who say rocks are atheist, and there's some people who say that's not possible because a rock can't hold a belief position. But you can say it lacks a belief or a lack theist. Although it doesn't really make sense to say that anyways, because who cares about what a rock thinks?
Side mind of a non-minded rock.
Yeah.
With creation frequency and dealing at the subatomic level, who knows what a rock's doing?
So the next question would be, how do you define the word faith? There's a lot of definitions of the word faith, and there's a lot of justification from, what is it, Hebrews 11:1 or 1:11? I think it's 11:1, isn't it?
One.
Yeah. So how do you define the word? How would you use it?
Wow. Well, you brought up the verse. I kind of like the way it lands. It does call for a little bit of probing. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. And so I think about the word substance, evidence. There's something going on that's tangible in the heart and mind. And I think those two things are important. It's not just mind, but it's heart. Something that's drawing towards something. Someone's feeling something or engaged in something. It's not just experiential, but there's something substantive in a person who's landing on and holding to a belief system. And somewhere there's an evidence in, whether it be in their cognitive thinking, in the way they've rationalized through different dogmas and doctrines and faiths, how they've synchronized science and faith, or the evidence of something that's very personal, experiential. So everybody's different. For me, I'd probably say it's a little combination of all of those. I got my degree in religions and philosophy, and went down a little rabbit hole of discovery in sacred texts. And that really helped me through a journal of what I felt was myth and what was not myth. But beyond that, also dealing with cosmology and beginnings, it kind of really helped fine-tune some things, whether it be a deism or a theism. But I have to say, not everybody has this experience. I guarantee it. I know I have friends who've never experienced anything like it. But I have had personal, supernatural encounter experiences that are mind-blowing, and most atheists would say I'm full of it. Wouldn't believe it, and that's fine. I believe that they have not experienced anything. I also believe that I have. So that's where I land my faith. It's rational. It's not a blind leap, but it is a step of hopeful evidence, substantive belief. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it definitely gives me a little insight. There's, I've taken a look into the word through different usages. A lot of words you can just figure out based on context what people actually mean by the word. The problem with faith is, there are some people who will use the word, and I'm definitely not saying it's you, but there are people I've seen use the word faith in 2 or 3 different ways, in a single sentence. Like, you have faith as in blind faith, accepting something just because somebody said it, or on no evidence at all, and then kind of shift towards a confidence or a strong confidence, and then faith in place for actual physical evidence. And so as it shifted through the conversation, it struck me one day, it's like some people really use it just to equivocate between one thing and another thing. So I really appreciate getting your view on how you use it.
Well, appreciate that. There's so many people on this planet, 7 billion almost, and the majority of them, vast majority of them, have some faith in something beyond naturalism or humanism. As such, we talked about the validity of each one of those faith beliefs, but they're experiencing something. They've got something going on, whether it's just a creedal or a cultural landing, or they actually have some kind of a covenant dynamic going on. These are kind of words that I kind of process between every faith. They all have their creeds. They believe it, they never go to church or synagogue or mosque. They have culture. They grew up in some countries, so they're landing there. You know, they've got what is a community when they're involved in their synagogue or mosque or a church or whatever, and so they have that community. But then they also have what I call a covenant, where something is just burned inside of them, a relational dynamic, whatever meaning they're looking at. So if you take a look at 7 billion people, and most of them have something, I find it's really on the atheist's onus to try to come to a proof that there's not something supernatural out there. It's an uphill battle for you. I feel for you, because most of humanity has got some kind of a supernatural link, whether it be culture, whatever. So that's where it is. They all have faith of some sort.
Interesting. Wow. That's definitely a lot to think about.
Sometimes I just go in these modes.
No, I love it. I love having the conversation, and I love learning new things. Some, sometimes I like being wrong because that means I learned something new.
Me too. If I'm not wrong, sometimes I haven't grown.
Yeah, those who refuse to change their mind are destined to be wrong eventually.
At least twice a day.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So, let's see. I think the next question I'd like to ask is, what are the characteristics of God? Like, how would you define God? Like an omni God, like omnipowerful, omnibenevolent? What are those characteristics?
Ouch, man. Yeah, you've moved ahead. I think we just went into 500 AD there. Jeez. Go back a little bit more in time there. The Upanishads, the Veda, they call it the Great That. And although they've got, Shiva, Vishnu, and all these others, at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they say let go of these things so they never were. They talk about the Great That, and really behind it all is this that. I've really processed through that, and that's what I gained by studying that. That is, what are the characteristics, and how do we know that this dimension? If there is a being out there beyond space and time and matter, outside of our continuum, the whole spectrum of it, how in the world can we define outside of our own speculations? I mean, sometimes the best we can do is Greek mythology, where we have wars, there's got to be a god of war. We have harvest, and let's ascribe that. In the Hindu religion, we have change, we have chaos. We have Ganesh who's holding on to the divine and to the humanity, some bridge between that, and they're trying to define that. So, you tell me, how do we find some characteristics of a divine being that, without that divine being's help, would have no clue? Right? It's like
Yeah.
looking at a painting. I'm looking at it, but how do I know the artist's intent? I can't get into the painting, but if the artist now draws me into a 3D world, I can understand what is behind that. And now I know that's an equivocation. I don't want to avoid the question, but man, have you not nailed it down? That's the toughest thing there is. I mean, I could give a litany of what I have experienced, an entire list of what I know theologically, but I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for. Omnipresent? Okay. If you're outside of time, yeah, time has no meaning. Omnipowerful? You created it all? Sure, why not? Are you powerful enough to stop yourself? Okay, now we're in a dilemma. A lot of philosophers have gone there, so I'm not sure what you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, the next question is, what are the minimal characteristics? So the kind of the purpose around this question is, there are some cultures that believe humans are gods. There are other cultures that believe every tree is a god, or other things are a god. Well, I agree 100%. Humans exist, okay? Rocks exist, trees exist, nature exists, but I don't think those are worthy of the title God. It doesn't seem like, what are you adding to humans or trees by calling them God, or equivalent to, or part of the nature of God? What does that do for you? So in order to, volume is very low. Is that, sorry? Yeah, Tony. Let me know. Is it all volume, or mine or his? Let me know. So in order to really have a argument for or against God, you got to know at least what are the minimal characteristics. Like, okay, so classical theism would be an omni God, omnibenevolent, omnipowerful. Let's see, all powerful, all knowing, all seeing, all present, and all good. But in order for you to call an entity God, does it have to possess all those 4 or 5 characteristics? Or can you take out all seeing, or take out all good, or take out all powerful? And that you can still adjust that to be maximally or all powerful to the point where it doesn't meet a logical contradiction.
Yeah. Well, again, with the Hindus, the great that, and of course that went into Buddhism, and they have all kinds of different entities. And I think we have to make a line between what we call in the Chaldean El and Elohim, or God, capital G, and demigod, little g. In the spiritual realm, there's all kinds of entities, whether it be angelic, quote unquote, demonic in some face, spirits in some face. So what are we talking about? There are a lot of people who would bow down and serve and worship a little g God because that has had some meaning to them. Now, whether that be the power that is intrinsic within a crystal, or whether they found something in a horoscope and they found some validity there, which all has to do with created beings. Okay, so if you're talking about the capital G God, that's a singularity. There are polytheisms out there where there are multiple capital G gods, but I'm not one of those. I believe that even in the polytheistic thought processes, they all move back to a primal oneness, unity, whatever it might be. Even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have this unity of oneness at the very beginning. So if we're looking at that oneness, capital G God, my take is this. Anything that is not created by the creator is non-God. So God is the only thing non-created. That's one aspect for me. Now we can get an evolution, all that type of stuff, but that'd be one thing. The second dynamic, I would probably say, this is my take on it, is anything, God is the only entity that is holy. So you brought up a lot of things. You brought up goodness and powerful and all this. But I would say that, no, his benevolence is a holy benevolence. His goodness is a holy goodness. His justice is a holy justice. In fact, I believe that God is the only entity that is holy and non-created. And that's my starting point. Anything else would have to come out of that, and that would be the litmus test of, is that of God?
Okay, so
That's where we're landing.
so the minimal things has to be the thing that created everything, and it has to be holy. And
Right.
and in holy also necessarily comes benevolent. Is that right?
Well, no, I think holy is the number one adjective that would be behind any word you put or ascribe to God. We can talk about goodness. Well, who's good? What's good? That was very philanthropic of you. That was kind of good, But everything that God has done that is good is a holy good. So your speculation and my speculation that says a good God can't do that. Well, a holy God is doing that, and it may not seem good to you and me, but it's good in the eyes of a holy God. So I don't know how it plays out in the long run, but I can buy into that. You also talk about anything that is outside time, space, and matter. I don't think you have anything outside of time, space, and matter. And I think God defines that pretty well in Genesis chapter 1, that in the beginning, time, God created, um, uh, God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens being space, and matter, the earth. And so you've got God in that very moment, because you can't have time. What's time without matter? What is matter without time or space? They all have to be in existence at the same time. So when God said, "Let it be," from whatever outside, then you've got something to talk about, a beginning of time, a place to talk about, things happening, things growing, relationships dynamics. I think all kinds of things we can talk about when it comes to philosophy, anthropology, morality, ethics. They don't exist before this God says, "Let's have it. I want to see it. Make it happen." So, I mean, when you talk about omnipotent, okay, I guess I can go there. Outside of time, so he's everywhere all the time. I got it. I can live with that. Omniscient. He knows all things. Well, now we get into things like predestination, foreknowledge, and what does that mean? And does it matter that he knows you don't have free will, or do you have free will? So I think that's kind of the lane you're going into right there, Jake. And I try to stay away from locking in definitions to a supernatural being that we can only know because they let us know it, or it, or him, or he, or she. God's not a man, so
He, she, it, or they.
Well, not humanoid.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just a fascinating conversation, and I probably right outside the lines of guys like Augustine and Anselm and Bacon and others who are dealing with all these constructs of who God is and what God is and how do we find it at some council of Nicaea. I don't land there. Now, I like doctrines, I like creeds, and I think they have reason, and I think they have rationale. But I think you limit a lot of things if you just start making God into a man. You might as well be a Greek mythologist.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like there's a lot of discussion to be had on what is the holy nature of God, and that's
Yes.
something I would love to get
Yeah.
into at
That's
some
the
point.
biggest thing for me. Holy means separate.
Yeah,
Separate, completely separate. There's nothing of me that could bring the holiness. I taint his holiness or its holiness, but
yeah,
somehow that holiness wants to invade my space.
yeah. I mean, you were correct. The next question is in reference to free will, but
Okay.
it's separate from what the characteristics of God are in part. I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and the ones that I've got in my head right now are it has to have the ability to prescriptively change the base reality, like prescriptively be like at will whenever it wants for whatever reason. It has to be able to adjust, change, or suspend. There are different ways that you could talk about what that means in a real world sense, but in essence, it has to be able to prescriptively change base reality at its own will. It has to have agency of some kind, so it has to be able to do things of its own accord. So, like a force of nature wouldn't have agency of its own. And then let's see, there was a third one. I can't remember what it was, but as far as it being required to be a good God or required to be able to see ahead in time, well, to be good, I don't think that's necessarily part of the minimal set of characteristics to call it a god. But in order to be able to see forwards and backwards in time and that kind of stuff, I really haven't settled on do I think that that's necessary, that kind of thing. So I really appreciate your insight. That's going to give me a lot to think about, and perhaps we can have some more discussions on that as well.
I like that. I think about this free will thing just briefly, if you don't mind, is the idea of, if there's a God who is a creator, holy God outside of it all and not created, that the timeline, the entire timeline from the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, whatever you want to say the first cause is, to the very end of it, whenever that is viewable by him from outside of it. But he sees it all because he's not in it, right? He, she, God. I don't. Let's. We have to deal with some kind of a pronoun. I don't want to be offensive to anybody out there, because God's not a man that he should die. But for the sake of, because I'm a biblical Judeo-Christian, if you don't mind, I'll use the term him for the sake of it. But all of female is within God. So forgive me on that. But this God is outside of the created timeline. So seeing it all tells me that it is seeable by that entity. And it does not change my perspective while I'm within the timeline. And the idea of free will, I can't remember the philosopher, Heraclitus might have said this of some sort, that said that it would be selfish of God to not create free will, so that man might share in the glory of thoughtful creation. So if we were just robots, we would have, he would, whatever that God would say, you have no capacity for thought and creation. Well, where's the joy in that? So the idea of giving us free will, even though that God sees it all, is for our benefit, that we can be partners in the beauty of creating something new. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So I like that definition by Heraclitus. And I kind of land on that why did God give us free will if that was given? Is because there's something beautiful about making a choice. Like, I met my wife. I'm really glad I made the choice to marry her. I'm even more glad that she made the choice to marry me. She had free will. So that was a good day.
You said Heraclitus?
I think it was Heraclitus.
Do you know when?
Let me see what that would be. I'm hoping I could find it. If I'm wrong on Heraclitus, forgive me.
I can't say I'm the best speller in the world, but ancient names.
Roditius. Anyway, I'll send you something on that. It's a great little quote. If it wasn't him, I apologize. But it had to do with the free will, God giving man free will to share the glory of creation.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've kind of touched on some of my next couple of questions here already. Let's move on to, could God have made the world in any other way?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Because I like the way you were describing God outside of time, be able to see the whole of time at once. I don't know if you're familiar with the B theory of time, which is not that I'm qualified to speak on that, but the way I understand it is, the A theory of time is we proceed through time as it is, whereas the B theory of time more holds to something like we have three spatial dimensions plus the dimension of time, and actual moving forward through time is an illusion. It all exists at once at all places, and it can be, it could theoretically be viewed outside of it as a whole, kind of like taking a movie and chopping up all the frames and viewing all the frames of the movie at one time. So you're taking 2 dimensions and turning it into 3, or 2 spread out, but so you can view it all at the same time. Similar, the B theory of time might look kind of similar to that, just with extra dimensions and things like that. So,
I think there are all kinds of dimensions. I am a huge fan of that. Not string theory or multiverses and all, but I think there are multiple dimensions that are completely undiscovered by mankind at this point in time.
Yeah.
So what does that mean as far as time and space? I couldn't even speculate.
We'll have to wait till we have access to them to make that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of theories on folding time and what that can look like as far as that B theory. you're talking about, and there's some great thinkers out there working on that. I don't think that would negate a creator outside of all things created.
Yeah, definitely. There's if we're able to do that, it raises many more questions, but it doesn't necessarily negate the possibility of a God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would not be a proof against God. It'd be fascinating actually to see what kind of dynamics would be on the other side of another dimension. I mean, that then we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Oh,
Fascinating.
I could go on just on that just forever. So
Me
let's.
too.
Um, have you given any thought to what type of evidence would convince you that a God does not exist?
Okay, you cut out there a second. What kind of evidence? What?
Would convince you that a God does not exist?
Wow. Um, I was just watching something on this, and the guy had a great answer, and I was really processing through it. I think it was Jordan Peterson, it might have been Ravi Zacharias, some of the guys I listened to. I guess if you could show me what laid behind the first cause and the Big Bang, that now evolutionists have come to grips with the fact that it did still have a starting point, and now they're talking about all kinds of speculations about what that looks like. Show me that there's something on the other side of that that might do that for me.
Okay.
That might be it. Right now, it's foolishness because they have admitted that it goes down to a pinpoint, and they can't figure out what the first cause was, and they're coming all kinds of weird ideas about separating themselves and folding on themselves and speaking among itself, and as if it has some sort of a mind itself or personality. And now you're getting into a very basic description of what God is. That when you get back to that, and then you start giving it's having a conversation among itself to fold over on itself to create the Big Bang. Well, you're really getting back to deism at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophy and a lot of science to be had right there at the first
Science
moment.
is phenomenal. Yeah, science is phenomenal right now, man. If you're following what's going on in science, wow, it is blowing things up. It's amazing.
That's kind of how I got to learn about the online atheist movement, is just listening to all these debates on YouTube about science and all these presentations about science and the Big Bang and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, after as many of those videos as I could get, YouTube just played a video by Matt Dillahunty, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never even considered that argument. And then since then, I've decided, no matter what position I am, I'm going to listen to as much of an opposing opinion as I can, like hear from the side that I believe, but also as much as I can from the side that I disagree with as well. And for me, as far as
I think there's some questions out there that are being sidelined a little bit. If you wouldn't mind, Jake, just some thought process. Of course, we might get to this in a minute, but the science is doing such a great job. But I think they're sidelining some questions that they don't want to answer. And let's be fair, science is really searching for truth. It's not the truth. It changes, it changes so fast now. We're discovering new things that we thought were true 15 years ago. In fact, with the whole genome and all the things going on with the study of that since 2002, I mean, I'm surprised there's an atheist left about what's going on when you go internally as well as externally into the cosmos. It's kind of blown me away right now. The last 10 years has been just like an explosion of understanding that I think digging deeper should take a person at least to a deistic approach, if not a theistic approach.
yeah, there's I have some friends who hold to that deism as opposed to theism versus theism as opposed to non-theism. So
Yeah,
it kind of depends on how you look at it. And
yeah.
honestly, depending on who I'm listening to or what Like there's a lot of merit to define it one way or the other, and it's really hard to know. I think that as far as looking at like the Big Bang, what happened after that is what we can say is, at least the way I understand it, is that is the start of our presentation, or what we can see of the universe around us. But as far as what happened
Yeah.
at the first moment and before that, if it even makes sense to talk about before that, as of right now, based on everything that I've listened to, everything I've read, is a point where we have no ability at the time to know, and we have to rely on philosophical arguments in addition to look into what the scientist, the cosmologist, and the astrophysics physicist, the quantum physicist, and
Yeah.
honestly, the a lot of it is just theoretical physics. Like, we have all these areas of physics and science that right now is just so much of it is theoretical. Until we make some sort of like breakthrough there, we're limited. So it's definitely a lot to think
Yeah.
about.
It really is. I mean, I'm sure you follow Sam Harris.
Yeah.
Maybe you've looked, and of course, I love Sam in listening to him, because he is wrestling, and I think rightly so, when you move into what's going on with this. Well, he doesn't use the word supernatural dynamic, but there's something beyond the natural that he's trying to wrestle with. Of course, he's gone to psychedelics and these type of things to try to find the root of the evolutionary aspect within us for some soul dynamic. And I think there's the gist of it that moves beyond um, um, thought, or just what's the word I'm looking for? I lost my word, but just kind of thinking about it and let it go. I can't think about it because we're here. I mean, we're having this conversation, you and I. You have the capacity. Something in you is asking these dynamic questions that I don't think a cat is asking. I know. I don't think a rock is asking. So there's something that you're asking and we're debating about that is beyond just what happened at the Big Bang. More than just a physical force or a matter that brought something into existence, but there is personality. And that's where I come from, being a deist to a theist. And this really kind of broke me into it when I got back to the basis of what God was, is this entity out there that put it into place, non-created, holy, which is non-tainted, has put this into place. Now, is it just a deism of a matter? Well, if all things that are created came from that entity, then personality also had to come from that. Male and female, the variations of all psyche and creation came from that. The creative just zeitgeist of that entity is tells me that it's not just a matter or force. It's some personality of sort. Now, that's as far as I got. I mean, and I was okay with that for a long time, that some personality outside time and space put things into place, and that's a higher ideal than I have or anything on the planet has, and that's worthy of my life search. That's worth my investigation. That's what put me into religions and seeking out philosophy and religions, trying to study what that being was. That's my journey. So I'm a theist.
You don't say.
Just because I'm enjoying your personality. That came from somewhere, dude. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Oh man, there were a couple of things in there that it just so much more I'd love to discuss, but
That's right. Go on.
I'm sure we could go on forever. Let's see. Yeah, earlier you were talking about some of your personal experiences for God, and is it rational to use personal experience as evidence for God?
I think it's rational to use personal experience for the existence of the supernatural.
Okay.
So if someone is an atheist, but they believe in supernatural, I'm trying to figure out, how do you wrestle with theism, the beyond natural or humanistic natural point of view, when there's so many people who have had some kind of supernatural encounter. Now you can say it's mass hypnosis or cultural situations where their brain's off or whatever, but I have had some incredible experiences that if it's not God, then I'll serve it instead, because that that made all the difference in my world. Now, I like I said, I kind of went into this idea of just philosophical thought about the theistic, that there was a prime start and it had personality, and that made me a theist. Then I studied all these religions, the sacred text, and kind of came around to this idea that if I'm going to know it, it has to be made known by it. And so, what does that look like? And so, in the text, it really means a lot to me that there's some kind of strict, rigorous system that tells me that what I'm reading is what was written, and not to say who wrote it, whatever. That's fine. But if the scribes, like for the Hebrew scriptures, if they were writing the text, and if there was even a little jot or tittle wrong, they'd burn the paper. And so I knew that the New Text was just as good or better than the Old one, all the way up to the time of the New Testament. And then I see the New Testament where we have the 27,000 documents of Mark, and they're so legitimate. And now and they're all identical with a little bit of nuances, but no major thought changes. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls show us that we've had this text from Isaiah that was 500 BC, and it's accurate to the letter. It's like, wow, okay. I can buy into the idea that what I'm reading is what was intended to be read. Now, with that in mind, there's some pretty crazy stuff going on in that Bible. The Old Testament, there's crazy stuff. So these people are lunatics, or they're just exaggerating, or there's something to behold. Now, that's how I kind of landed on some authority in the text that gave me some credence in what am I reading. But personally, Jake, you asked my questions. I could tell you story after story. I'll just give you one briefly. And you're going to say it didn't happen. It's okay. I'll let you say it. It's okay. We may never talk again. But I'm telling you, if I'm lying, I'm dying. This really happened. I was living in Bothell and just kind of praying like I normally do. And I think I have a conversation with God, like a covenant relationship, and best friend, and kind of talk and hear and trying to find out what's going on and what's right for the day. And I just got this impression. Now, I can say it's an impression, all right, that I should drive to Vancouver, BC. That's crazy. Now, who has this thought? This is a stupid thought. That's okay. I did it. So I got in my car, drove to Vancouver, BC, and I was parked at the only place I knew. I went to Stanley Park and sat there. Started saying, what should I do? What am I supposed to do? I'm just stupid that I'm here. And I got this impression. Go buy a gallon of milk. It's 2 liters up there. But I said, okay. I don't know. It sounds weird. Maybe I'm a lunatic. That's fine. So I went and bought 2 liters of milk, and I was sitting in the passenger side of my 280ZX. Now I'm driving around saying, what am I supposed to do? Something. I'm driving, not even know where I'm going across the Lionsgate Bridge, and I get this impression that I'm supposed to pull off the road at Lionsgate Park. So I do, and I'm sitting there. So I feel like an idiot. I've driven for hours, and bought some milk, and it's lunacy. But I know this voice is in me. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this lady starts walking along the sidewalk in front of my car, and I hear this voice saying, give it to her. So I get out of my car, and I'm nervous because this is crazy stuff, and I say, ma'am, I'm supposed to give you this milk. And I'll tell you, Jake, she started to cry right in front of my eyes. And I go, I don't know what's going on. She goes, I prayed this morning, said, God, if you're real, give me milk for my baby. And I mean, that's the most bizarre thing. I got story after story after story of things like that are beyond the natural. It's okay if you say that bunch of BS. It's okay, buddy. I don't deny the fact you may not have those experiences. I'm just telling you what I went through. Okay, so that's a real thing. My experience. I couldn't deny it. If I denied it, it's not deny the existence of my wife. So these things kind of lock me in. They lock me in somehow. Whether I'm a Catholic or a Protestant or this, it's irrelevant. I'm locked into the existence of a personal God who wants to talk to and deal with the heart of his creation. That's kind of where I land.
Yeah.
Scary way.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say, I definitely wouldn't say that the experience didn't happen to you, but it is definitely, it's very interesting, and it's the type of thing that would be interesting to look deeper into, as far as the the circumstances around it. What caused you to go up there? What caused you to give her that? This they have it in the bags, right? Is that the milk bags in Canada, right?
Well, it was 2 liters at that point in time, so it was plastic. It
Oh,
was a long
okay.
time ago.
Oh, okay. So you crossed over the border into Canada, picked up some milk, pulled over at a park, and ended up giving it to a lady who had just been needing it and praying for it.
Yeah.
It's definitely a
I know,
powerful
right?
story.
It is. I mean, I got a bunch of them like that, and I don't think that should be an aberration. As I've talked to people, that if you can get beyond the fact that you were born in Saudi Arabia, so you're a Muslim, or you're born in Israel, so you're a Jew, or you're born in India, so you're a Hindu, or born in America, so you're a Christian, you get away from the cultural stuff, and even walk away from some of the creeds, some of the beliefs and doctrines that have locked you into some religious system that is kind of taking you away from the person you're supposed to be talking to. I mean, I have a better conversation with someone who is a tree hugger than I do with some people who go to church every week, because they're at least aware of some kind of a supernatural entity, though it be created. At least they're experiencing some connection with a created entity that gives some kind of I don't know, more than just routine. I'm about relationship. I think that mankind was made to be in connection with the divine. I really do.
Okay. So these types of personal experiences, like they're kind of necessarily like one way for a lot of them. Like it's your experience and it's not my experience, and I don't have a way to access that experience. Are these types of personal experiences? Do you think that they should be convincing to other people?
I think that they should if someone's even open to uh, the idea that these things can happen, though they may never experience themselves, Jake, if they're open to the idea that these things can happen, and they do happen, it certainly will allow them to move away from complete naturalism and try to delve into something a little bit more on the beyond natural or supernatural. And I hate that word supernatural, because in my idea, the creator, it's natural for the creator to do anything that being wants to do within the system it created. And they can shift it all together. Now, someone might say, well, this is just a scientific thing where maybe your brain waves got on the same frequency and you have these little thoughts that are beyond time and space, and they had this thought, and you had this thought, and it's just something within the collective matrix of of the quantum reality. Okay, that's fine. That's good by me. At least let's have a conversation about that, rather than there's nothing like that on the planet. Good night. I was watching a football game once, and I just felt like I should get up and leave the game, which is tough for me because I'm a Seahawk freak, and go over to my church and began to pray. And so I went over to the church and I began to pray, and I saw, like, in this big building, about 12 different seats, and just went and just prayed over these seats. I don't know what's going to happen here, but if there's someone that comes tonight in this meeting tonight, let them be blessed. 12 seats. One was in the balcony, and then I felt like I was done. Went back and watched the Seahawks lost. That was a long time ago. So that night when the service started and people were coming in, we had a lot of people, but the place was not full by any means. But on the base floor, 11 seats were all taken by people, and no one was at the balcony. Well, about halfway through the service, when they're singing and stuff like that, one person came in, went upstairs, and sat in the very chair I prayed for. So now I'm, oh my gosh, the 12 places I prayed for, people are sitting. So we spoke, talked about God, read some scriptures and stuff, and had people come pray for. 20 people came forward. 12 of them were the people in these seats. So at that point in time, you talking about faith? Dude, it was soaring. I mean, I was like, what in the world, man? So I went and I just prayed for these people, and people got healed. One person had ovarian cancer, and prayed for them. They got healed. Came back. My wife and I left that church, and we came back a year later. They had a little baby girl in their arms, and God had healed this woman. Now, these are true stories, and I think they at least should cause someone to say, wow, if there's something like that out there, I kind of want to look at it. And belief in God, I think it would lead you to at least a search for something more than just what nature has to offer. But even if it's just natural and something that we haven't even discovered, and that it's worth the pursuit. My goodness, that's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, no, that's it kind of leads right into the next question here, and it's I want to make sure, like, I don't want to be like, oh, this could have happened or this could happen. I don't want to be, pushing it, but it definitely, if I was there, I think it would give me at least pause. And definitely, you talked about it would put you on the search. Well, hey, we are right here on the search, right here. Either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, right.
So the next question was going to be, do you believe in intercessory prayer? And it definitely sounds like you do.
Yeah, I do. Well, you can look at it from a scientific approach. There is something absolutely cathartic to touch. We know that. Science has proven that, right? We know that actually a hug, 20 seconds, brings healing to people. We know that. We know that when someone, when their mind is engaged and their emotions are listened to, something happens in their brain waves that brings healing to them. This is scientific stuff. Fantastic research. And Ian McGilchrist just wrote a book on the master and his emissary on the right brain and left brain, worth your reading. But if you just want to look at it a natural way, good thoughts, good vibes make a difference in the frequencies of whatever's going on in existence. Now, I personally believe in that because I believe that which is not created made it so that that creation should be connected. And so I can verbalize a prayer. And when I say a word, is a vibration that goes out in the word, the sound vibes. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was a sonic blast. And in that vibration of the sound, things came into existence. And they call it the Rima word of God versus the Logos, the spoken word of God. So I do believe that we as created beings with a divine spark in connection to that creator can speak and have an impact on people, whether it's part of his divine creation, it's natural, or through a beyond natural thing that I speak, God listens, and God says, okay. That's intercessory prayer for me. And I've done it a lot.
One of the things my dad told me when I was young is that if I remember the story correctly, I think he said that the part of the Jewish faith was you didn't have to close your eyes to pray, but you couldn't see anything, so you had to have all the lights off. Something along those lines. It was a little weird. But as far back as I can remember, it never made any sense to me to be required to put your hands together, bow your head, and close your eyes, because God can know what's in your mind. So you can pray to Him, in my view, that, like, in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if you're in the praying position. It doesn't matter if you're in church or out of church. It doesn't matter if you're doing something else at the same time. A thought is as good as a prayer. So they can be equivalent, if at the very least, if you're intending it as a prayer.
I think that thoughts are good, but and I'm not sure. I mean, there's some scientist stuff. If you have a thought and be able to telekinetically put that into somebody else's heartbeat, I don't know. I personally think that your ears need to hear your mouth speak out new creation. And so if I have a thought, I'm not afraid to speak it out, because my ears and your ears need to hear what needs to be spoken. The vibration comes from me to you, even through this technology. Now, in regard to prayer, I don't think you need to close your eyes. In fact, I'm praying right now in the back of my mind, just like you have a computer feed with your Word document and things you have there. I'm praying and saying, Lord, give me some insights, give me some wisdom, so I have this little conduit, a connection that I'm relying on, so that I'm giving solid answers, timely answers, but not rote answers or routine answers. I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. It never has been.
Okay.
So I right now I'm praying in the back of my mind, but I'm looking right at you,
Yeah.
reading your eyes, going, "What in the world is going on here?" You don't have to close your eyes unless you need to be silent and listen. If you haven't learned how to listen, then you need to block out some things so you can fine tune that voice.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to the ritual of prayer in like a meditation type of stance. There's a lot to be had from calming your mind and talking through with yourself, that kind of thing.
Good job. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Jake.
Do you think God has a plan for everyone and everything?
Yeah.
And when you pray to like heal somebody of a sickness or help you through a difficult time, does that affect or change God's plan, or was that part of God's plan from the beginning? Like, is it something that you can change, or does it really matter that you prayed?
Well, that's
Oh, you cut out there for a sec.
yeah. I'm here. You there?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think there are a lot of faith healers out there that like to play that game. Well, that wasn't God's will. You know, it didn't work out that day. Whatever it might be. I mean, it either is His will or it is not His will, and maybe I missed His will, and that's okay. But when we think about healing, I think that the world today has lost the idea of the doctrine of suffering. We don't believe that suffering is part of human existence, and that's a fool's errand. We all suffer, and God never promised us non-suffering. And so the day that you suffered, you say there is no God. Well, you had a bad theology in the beginning. Now, I do believe that God has a plan for our life in regard to health and healing. I think He gave us 5 roads to that, one of which is just by our bodies and white blood cells. Heal's pretty good design to me. Nice job. Heal yourself. Well done. He also put on our planet a lot of medicinals that if we find them, discover those, they can really help us in a lot of ways. Also gave some insights to doctors to go on the internal medication, to go and do surgery, and good night. You can survive cancer. Well played, sir. Nicely done. That's a third form of healing. I also think the fourth form is sometimes God does a supernatural. Now you're blind, now you see. Wow, fantastic. Rare, I think, but I've seen things happen that'll blow you away. And the last one, and we don't get this, is guess what? I'm a lot older than you. My bones ache, and there's going to come a day when I die. And when I go to heaven, that's what's called a divine healing, a complete healing where I won't be in pain anymore. But all of those dynamics of healing are God's plan. And I'm not sure what He's going to do right now. Let you have your white blood cells or take some medication or have surgery. Maybe He wants to do an immediate deal, or maybe you're going to die. It's okay. One way or another, there's a healing coming. And that's kind of where I land. And how do I pray? I pray God's will. I don't know what His will is. Jesus said, pray your will on heaven right here on earth. So whatever you want to do, let it happen. Let me line up to it.
There's a lot of like I kind of want to know how you tell the difference between a divine healing and the combination of medicine and your own body working to heal itself.
I call it, it's all divine healing. It's all divine healing. The fact that you are created to heal yourself is fantastic. It's the fact that you can go find a plant, beat it up, work it out, heat it up, and take it and heal yourself. Awesome. In fact, if somebody could take a scalpel to you and cut out some cancer, dude, that's not beyond the normal rationale. It's awesome, right? So how do you tell the difference? Why tell the difference? They're all beautiful.
And I think the last question before we move on to, we actually went on the questions a lot longer than I figured we would. It's all right. It's good discussion. I love the discussion, and the back and forth has been excellent so far. I mean, the last question I'm gonna go with here is it possible for God to lie? Is that contradictory, or is that something that is okay for God to do? What's your thoughts on that?
I would say no. Holiness would not allow for lying. Leviticus says God is not a man that He should lie. Now we also see some text in the Hebrew literature about God repenting, and that just means change a course of action. Now, does it mean that He didn't want to do that course of action in the first place, or was He allowing mankind to partner with Him in what His ultimate plan was? A lot of illustrations about Sodom and Gomorrah and Abraham debating with God if there's 50, if there's 10, whatever it looks like, and sometimes with Lot getting out of there before it gets destroyed. Also, we take a look at Jonah and Nineveh, where God said he was going to destroy it, but they repented, so he withheld his hand on it. So I don't think God lies. I don't think it's possible for a holy God to lie. In fact, I don't think a lying God would be a God that I would serve.
Okay.
Because truth is very important. I search for truth, as you do. You're searching for truth. And sometimes the facts we have in front of us are the facts of the day. But if I had the facts of the day in the year 500, I would not have all the facts. I have a lot more facts now than they had in the year 1500. Martin Luther is not the end all of all theological thought. You know, in 1890s and 1860s, Darwin is not the end of the conversation. We know a lot more facts, but we're both in the search of truth, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's true? What's true? How does this play out, man? And I think we're all asking that question, ideally. Now, a lot of people aren't. I think they're just living life, getting up, going to work, coming home, having a meal, and going to bed, hoping for a good weekend with the bud. That's okay too. But if you have an inkling to think about what this whole thing's about, you're in search for truth, and that's good. And he doesn't lie. So keep searching, because I think if you search for the truth, you're going to find the truth, and the truth will set you free. You might have heard that before.
Yeah, a couple times. So yeah, like I said, the questions, I have tons and tons more, but part of bringing you on here was to have you give what you think is either your favorite or best evidence for God, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I want to give you the time to go ahead and give us that, what it is in your view.
Oh man, I think this is bad service here.
Yeah.
I can get that here. Come on, Lord.
Yeah, it is going out.
Yeah, okay, you're coming back. There you are, sir.
I can hear you, but you're frozen.
Okay, here we go. You got me now? Hopefully we can make this happen.
I can hear you, but I don't see you.
Okay, I can see you and hear you, and I can see me and hear me.
Now I can see you. There we go.
Good deal. Okay. So you wanted to ask some questions about the more, just have a conversation about reasons for belief? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's whatever you think is. What's your best evidence for God, or what's your best reason to believe in God, or your knockdown argument for God? So what is your best reason to believe in God, essentially, or favorite?
Yeah, thank you. I don't really go into. A lot of people just go internally to scriptures. That's a lot of good stuff. That was not my journey. I go to science first and the beginning. And so I kind of talked about the cosmology of it, the beginnings, and I could not deal with the fact that there was personality before my eyes. And I do believe in, like to start, I think, therefore I am. And I don't think I'm some sort of an existential dream of somebody else's. So with that in mind, I have to look back to the beginning and think that whatever brought this into being had a personality as well. That is God. That was first and foremost for me. And I think that right now science is catching up to that in a great way. Whether they term it different things or not, that's fine. That's where I landed. The second thing was in spiritual texts and how they came about and why they came about and how reliable they were over the course of time in their translations as I sought out teachings about this divine being. Okay. And I landed on the Genesis passage that felt most in line with what I felt to be true in the cosmology of the beginnings. And I believe in the Yom. I'm along old Earth, if you would. I believe that the Yom is an epic, and I think it fits perfectly within the scientific findings of creation and microevolutionary timeline. So that really helped me. I would call myself a evolutionary creationist. The text brought me to the idea of a personal God and how that God could define this stuff. I tell you, Jake, some of the religions talked me out of themselves. They really did. They talked me into monotheism. they talked me into Judeo-Christianity, uh, more so than Judeo-Christianity talked me into itself. Like I talked about the Upanishads and and that built into Buddhism and the spiritual dynamics of that, the philosophies of life. They moved me towards a monotheistic approach. And so I bought into that. The last thing that I talked about is for me is when when I came to the idea that there was a personal God at the beginning, and that through sacred writings, that personal God was trying to connect with individuals, not just societies, but individuals, and I am one. Then it became a personal search of what does it mean to be in connection with the divine. And it had nothing to do with the church, had nothing to do with the family of believers, it had nothing to do with the preacher. It had everything to do with me connecting with that divine. Now, does that translate to you? I don't know. You'll have to come to your conclusions as to what the beginning of the cosmos means. What if it does come up to a deistic approach or a theistic approach, and you don't know what that is, then your search for religions will take you down another road. I don't know what it looks like. Maybe it's a miracle. I can tell you the story that when my daughter was 10, we were in an accident. We were sledding, and she hit a car, crushed her skull, and died in my arms. Now, that's either going to make you or break you. You're either going to call on God or you're going to run from God. All I could do was call on God. Now, in my arms, and she was dead, declared dead, drove her down the hill toward a hospital. The doctor said she's not going to make it. She didn't make it, but she came back to life. She'll never walk again. She'll never have a brain. Well, she does. She's completely healed. Now she's 30. She's got my first grandson. It's a miracle. Now, that's an amazing thing. But she had an out-of-body experience. She came back and says, Daddy, I was outside, and I said, I can't leave my mommy and daddy. And so the Lord said, send her back. Now, that's her story. I wasn't there to witness that, but I saw my dead daughter in my arms. So for me, it's not just cerebral. But I'll tell you what, I'm not a dumb guy. I mean, I read a lot, and I study a lot. And so I think I'm a rational being. But I've had way too many experiences. So you call me a fool of faith, but I do believe each person can come in contact with the divine. In fact, my entire life is called the covenant of I do. That I walk in covenant. Just like you have a covenant with your wife, you don't have to have a bunch of rules and regulations of do's and don'ts. You know what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And when you don't do it, there's a cold chill in the air because you broke covenant. Until you say, I'm sorry, I'm good to go. Then your wife says, it's all right. And you hug, it's all good. The warmth of your house is back. It's the exact same thing with creation. And I think we're to chill with God. We're doing a whole lot of things out of relationship with the divine I do. And when I say I do to that divine being, there's a new covenant, a dynamic that I walk in and day out. And every conversation I have at the pub or at the bar, at the restaurant, with my friends downtown, all of my friends, I know that I am, this hat designed by my son, non-citizen, is I'm not a citizen of this world. I'm a citizen of a different world. And I'm in connection with the divine being, and I'm here to have a conversation with people saying, you can too. You can too. Don't give up the search, because the divine being is not going to give up the search on you. Now, that's my take. Is it transferable? I don't know. I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. Wow. That's that's got to be with your daughter. This tough. But you said she made a full recovery.
Yeah, that was when she was 10. That was 20 years ago.
Wow.
And I tell you, when I held her in my arms, no breath, no air. All I could call on was Christ. Jesus, 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 help me. And we didn't even get into the person of Christ. And that's a whole nother topic about whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew, or find Christ in Christ. Can you go to heaven without Christ? Whole nother conversation. But that's where I landed in this personal dynamic of the love relationship with the divine creator.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. You were talking about. Don't let me talk over you if you still got more on that.
No, that's fine.
Seeing the supernatural is part of what brought you to Christianity. And can you talk about how other people, or how I could see like the supernatural? How are you identifying or finding the supernatural there?
Well, there's a spectrum, right? And it's kind of like when you talk about a luminescent, there's a spectrum of dark and light. They're on the same spectrum. You think about divine, people are looking for some sort of kumbaya, Michael Archangel, shining light, knock you off your horse type of a moment. And they completely are ignorant of the breath they're taking right now and the spark of life in them that is as divine as any moment you'll ever have. Now, I don't know if you have any kids, but I'll tell you what, the birth of my kids were kind of an awakening of the full circle of life, and I thought that was a pretty divine, sacred moment. And I think if humanity starts looking for sacred spaces in their hearts, they'll be closer to the truth. I'm a Welsh guy. My family goes back to Wales. Of course, the Celtic fathers of the first couple of centuries are pretty amazing, 400, 500. And they were not really Roman Catholics. They were their own little breed of mystics, if you would mind, that talked about places called thin places. Thin places. And they found these places that were sacred and close, where heavens would meet the earth, and you can find them. It doesn't have to be on the top of a mountain or in a grove, but you're going to have to find it somewhere in your own space, your home, backyard, some walk, some hike, maybe just in a solace of your own mind to find a thin space where you can sense the divine. Now, I think that's possible. I know it's possible because I live in that space. I don't think I'm alone in that space. I think there are a lot of people who live there. And I know that different religions call them different things. Maybe they call them Sufis or imams or all kinds of different terms. And they all have that little sacred space there. And I think they're linked to something. My guess is most of them are linked to demigods, if not to the divine creator. But you asked me about personal experience and what's divine. Every breath I take is divine. I think this conversation is a spiritual conversation. And I'm not trying to convert anybody. This is not my game plan. I don't try to evangelize or proselytize. Dude, you can find God and you don't. I believe that his story is we talk about it is his story and my story is the story. So if the divine has found any way into your life, then that's the story. I don't know what you got or what it's going to mean for you, Jake. I have no clue, but I know what it meant for me. And all I can tell you is my story. So I'm not trying to sway you, not trying to convert you. I'm just saying there's a lot of divine spaces to be lived in when you look for it, pursue it.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounded like you were saying that in order to see the divine or to see the supernatural, you have to go out and specifically look for it. Like you were talking about sitting down or sitting back and searching for that part in your mind where you can see it and be with it. Is that kind of...
Well, here's the cheat. Yeah, here's the cheat. It's a bummer, right? But what does God's plan mean, and what is free will, and how does that play out? Because I'm of the opinion that every single person on this planet has got some kind of a veil over their eyes and over their heart. I think they've got some covering that blocks their ability to see beyond the natural. I'm not even sure that sometimes they even want to, but something has blocked it. And how do you lift that veil so you can see beyond the natural?
You cut out there after you said see beyond the natural.
Yeah. I believe that it's God's plan for you to connect with him. I think it's part of his creative plan to walk in divine covenant, I do relationship with every person. But I think that each one of us have a veil that we have to personally lift and say, I'm going to look with new eyes, with a new heart, and see the cosmos and all things created in a beautiful light of a created mindset rather than happenstance, chance. It just happened to come about, and I'm a
bag of amoebas working through my time continuum, that there's something greater. Do I want you to go to some faith healer? No, man. There's a lot of charlatans out there, right? And do I think you got to climb a mountain and find some monks out there to slap you on the head, anoint you with oil? I don't think so, man. I don't think you have to do that at all. But you got to be open to the divine. And if you're not open to the divine, then the glasses and the goggles, are still on, and it's not findable. I think God would allow you to lift that, whatever search you're on. But it has to be a hunger. Now, here's the thing you mentioned earlier, Jake, that you kind of left Christianity for atheism, and I don't know if that's the time to even talk about that. Maybe another time if you're open to it. But there was a turning point where, quote unquote, the church was not sufficient, and it usually is not. An individual was a hypocrite, and they usually are. Or the lack of any experience of anything beyond creed was your story, and it was not enough, and it rarely is.
Yeah. The kind of my journey out of Christianity and into atheism, it took a long period of time, and I can't remember exactly what happened first, if we got pregnant with my first son, or if it was me first hearing these arguments against God. So, like, I was listening to Sam. No, was it Sam Harris? No, it wasn't Sam Harris. It was some astrophysicist. There's a couple of them. I always forget their names, like Krauss and somebody else, and what's his name? Hayden Planetarium. Gosh, wow, you forget names sometimes. But it was a
Oh, I know.
it was a talk between about
Not
4 or
Tyson.
5.
You're not talking about Tyson, right?
Yeah, he was on there too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it was them. I think it was all of them all on the same discussion. If it wasn't all the same discussion, it was like one discussion then another discussion, right in a row. And so I'm just listening to this in the car, and the next thing that popped up was Matt Dillahunty's Down Under tour with Aaron Raw and Seth Andrews, and he gave the moral argument, and I listened to it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had never, up until that point, never considered the moral argument for or against God. It was mind blowing, and at that point, I decided to go in and start listening to more of these, and it just kind of, with the algorithm, how it works is it kind of starts playing more stuff that you listen to, so it naturally it led into that. And around the same time, my son was born. Now, let me think. I think that actually happened after my son was born. And like you were talking about, when your child is born, it gives you a whole new perspective on life. And before he was born, I said, hey, I'm not going to tell him Santa Claus is real. Telling him Santa Claus is real is literally lying to him, and I won't lie to him like that. Plus, when you find out that Santa Claus isn't real, you start to think, oh, these other things, like, oh, if Santa Claus isn't real, is Jesus not real? And I thought that would be wrong to do that to him, to not only just lying to him, but that kind of what do you call it?
To set him up.
Setting him up for failure. And at that time, I was still a Christian. I still believed Jesus was God and all that. And so I just said I wasn't going to lie to him like that, and I'll go along with the game, and I'll tell him, yeah, this is a fun thing to do, but it isn't necessarily real. And I'll just let him figure it out on his own, but not encourage the myth. And then when he was, I think he was 11 months old, I put on like a flannel shirt or something like that on him, and it was a little bit too big. And because up until that point, they lay in the cradle and you have to hold the bottle for them, and they can't do anything more than roll over for a long time, and crawling. But this is after he was walking, right? And he's around 11 months old, and I put on the shirt, the shirt on him, and he walks down the hallway, and he does the shoulder roll and the elbow up with the twisting of the wrist, and I think I said out loud, "Oh my gosh, you're a fully autonomous person." Like,
Yeah.
like I knew it before that, but that's when it really hit me. I knew it, and I said again, I'm not gonna lie to him. I can't tell him God does exist without knowing, without being able to show it that God does exist. So it would be dishonest, perhaps to the point of a lie, to tell him God exists if I can't show my work, if I can't show him, see, this is how you find God. And so that, with a bunch of other things, with spending like 30 or 40 hours a week just listening to arguments from both sides, I ended up becoming atheist. So that's kind of the short version.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for telling me your journey. I appreciate that very much. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one of the things that really struck me was listening to William Lane Craig, listening to Ravi Zacharias. I wouldn't even. I do listen to a little bit of Jordan Peterson, but I don't even. He doesn't really fit in either camp.
He's not. Yeah. I love the way he thinks.
I
watch him and Sam Harris debate all the time. It's like, come on, guys. But I love the glitch that the Neo Hawkins guys are all getting at Sam Harris. These guys, they're befuddled about this they don't even use the word supernatural. It's beyond natural motif. And they're going into you talk about the evolution of morality. Where do ethics land? Is it the genome? Is it somewhere in the evolutionary thing where we move some direction? It's fascinating stuff. And I know talk about the morality of God. And I get it, man. How does God allow a person to die? How does God allow my 10-year-old to go through that? How does God allow genocide? All that. How can a good God, allow this? And so when I get to the idea of holiness, I say, God's going to say, how come I gave you every capacity, everything in you as a human being to make a good choice. And you as a collective have screwed it up. You blaming me? That's how I take it, because he's a holy God, and I put that adjective on there. Look, man, we are not a holy people. Let's put it straight. War has been going on, not just religions, but geographic wars, genocidal wars over the size of the shape of your nose, the color of your skin. That's humanity at its best. So when we start talking about where's the moral ethic of mankind, I kind of get lost in that and say, I haven't seen it, and I got a minor in history. Someone show me the morality of mankind. I haven't seen it.
Do you think God wrote or implanted his moral law or some sort of moral code on us?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, this is long before Judaism, which is basically 1500 BC. We're talking about beginning of the walking man, rational man, whatever you want to call it. That there's something within us that That's why I love the Jewish concept of Genesis 1 and 2, where he spoke everything into existence. But with man, he shaped us and he breathed in us. It's the only time he breathed into us. Everything else is spoken. The vibrations of all creation are these vibrations of subatomic waves, but not mankind. There's the breath of God in every being. The Jews call it, there are souled beings, there are soulish beings, and there are soulless beings. Whereas you've got mankind being a souled being. You've got cats and dogs that are soul-ish, if you wouldn't mind. And you have alligators, snakes, and other things that are soulless. You don't see the connection of community or interspecies connectivity. I like that there's something in us. it takes different shapes and different cultures over thousands and thousands of years. But you can see every society having at least some form of about 7 laws that are called the Noetic laws of not killing is bad for a society. Being some authoritative system is good for a society. Just different laws like that.
Yeah. You said you were old Earth, right? 13.8 billion year universe.
Oh, I think we go back billions of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like the souled versus soulish versus non-souled kind of sounds like how closely we're evolutionarily related. Like cats and dogs are mammals just like us, but alligators and lizards and stuff were much more diverged. Older ancestors. They're what are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I link it
Reptiles.
to the days of creation. Yeah, I appreciate the concept. But, in talking about evolution there, we'll probably have to make some sort of a distinction there, is that I think the universe is billions of years old. And as we go through macro evolutionary type of things, that we see the yomes of Genesis 1. But I do believe that there are spurts of creation, not evolution, each one in its own kind. And you can see in the layout of that, you're not going to have much of life if you've got a certain number of eons that need plantation, but you haven't got bees. I'd like to know how the pollen got from one place to another to have the flora take place without the insects coming at the exact same time. That would be fascinating study in and of itself. But I don't think that the souls or the soulishness has to do with the days of creation. But I do believe that there's not macro evolution. I think the Cambrian explosion kind of tells us that you don't have these links in specials prior to that. In fact, we don't have very many, if any, of these macro links at all. And so I think each species was created in its kind and has microevolution within its species over the course of time. Now, that's how I hold to it. So I wouldn't think that I come from a primordial soup into some pre-existing ancestor. That's not where I would land. I do believe in the creative touch of God over the yomes and epochs of time. And I think the last day of creation, the last 2 days, are pretty quick within the evolution of the universe. Whereas you can have plants, but you have to have other species to make that flora exist. You have cycles of existence where there's food cycles and water cycles that have to exist simultaneously. So you're not going to have a bird system that doesn't have a mouse system for its food. So when you have to think about what we know to be true in just biology and zoology, you're going to have those type of creative dynamics come at a very quick pace, not over the course of millions and millions of years, because they could not exist without the existence of others. That really helped me come to grips with how I stood in the evolution and creation dynamics. I don't believe in interspecies macroevolution at all. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is that the strongest thing you've ever heard me say? It doesn't make rational sense. It doesn't make scientific sense. And if I'm anything, I try to be as scientific as possible.
Yeah. Well, I have to say there's a lot of that definitely has answers to how it came to be, as far as we can tell. I mean, so there's a lot of it that definitely, I mean, as far as I can tell, makes a lot of sense as to how the plants came. Like you spoke to like cycles and that kind of stuff. Like there were definitely cycles in the early Earth. It's just some of it took quite a long time. Like the evolution of, or what, I forget how it's put, but like how we got to have an oxygen-rich planet versus not. It just took a very long time.
I'm with you there.
I'm not.
I'm okay with that.
I'm not
okay with that.
I'm not like an expert at all in that kind of stuff, but like
I have a problem with the dandelion becoming an oak tree. I have a problem with the beautiful creative aspect of all of fauna being a flora not being landed at the same time frame, and I have a problem with that.
So specifically that dandelion becoming an oak tree. That
just hyperbole, right?
Right, because that's not what evolution says happened at all. That's not what science says happened. It's ancestors of both of those. There's a common ancestor,
Right.
and they come from plants.
No,
Like
I understand that.
yeah,
What I kind of love on that though is the fantastic thing is and I know we get into the idea of probabilities, and this was really kind of a catalyst for me and the debate on probabilities and why even argue with it, because there's one and whatever, we had the one. Well, that's fine, but I have a problem with multiple ones. And for every one of those ones that are multiple probabilities that are so astronomical to come to bear, such as from this soup, we just happen to have not just this happen, but and this, uh, independently from the other, nearing the same even 100 million time frame, that they all happen to come into existence. Each one of those, the odds of that are so astronomical. But we're in agreement. We want to say, well, it happened that way. Then we go to the same thing of our ancestors for all of the animal life of that. Well, each one of those links, it happened, but each one of the odds of that are beyond the pale of mathematical understanding. And make up numbers to come up with those things, and to have it happen thousands of times, it is beyond the pale of what I can rationalize. And I've looked at it a lot, and I know that a lot of my friends who are atheists just can't stand the probability thing, because they talk about odds, and okay, who cares about the odds, because the odds came true. And if you don't have the odds, we have multiverse, so it did happen. We have to create all the odds and all the black hole, everything, ability for it to happen even once, let alone evolutionary jumps in interspecies independently thousands of times. For me, I couldn't buy into that, Jake. I've looked at it 100 times, and I just say I don't. Maybe I'm not reading it right, and I have listened to a lot of studies. I've read Hawkins, I've read all these guys. And I get what you're saying. I just cannot believe the odds.
well,
I cannot believe the odds.
as far as the
Great.
odds argument, I have to disagree with you on that. I'd say
Okay.
the odds are very high, actually. It's very likely, and I'm not just speaking. Oh, it happened. We're here. One and one. Okay, that's a valid argument, but that's not what I'm talking about. If you just look at how big the Earth is, it's not just right here. The odds of this one happening right here in this one spot are, sure, that's astronomical. But if you look at it across the whole Earth at the same time, for as much time as it took, it's last I checked, the estimate was within like 500 million years is when we had life. But when you're talking about that amount of time over that amount of space with that amount of essentially tries happening all together simultaneously, the odds of it happening are extremely high. For instance, what are the odds that you're going to win the lottery? Well, none if you don't go buy a lottery ticket. But assuming you do buy a lottery ticket,
Yeah.
your odds to win the Powerball or the Mega Millions is something like 1 in 400,000, or 400 million, I mean.
400 million.
But what are the odds somebody's going to win that this year? Almost almost 100%. I don't think a lottery of either one of those two lotteries has gone more than 18 months without being won by somebody. So the odds that this one spot or you are going to win is very low, but the odds that somebody's going to win it is so high.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense
No, I
to
love
think
that.
of it as in not going to happen. And then
Yeah, I love that. But my thought on that, and I think that's right. But when I start thinking about 2002 and the new study of RNA and DNA and genomes and DNA sequences, the idea of macro Darwinian evolution is troublesome in using the odds identity. Okay, I'll grant you. Okay, we have soup and we got the situation there, and so all of a sudden we're gonna have one little cell coming out. What are the odds of that? One. It had a lot of time to do that. Fair enough. From that, it breaks into another. All right, that's a nice another leap. Good thing that happened within a 100 million year sequence. It took a long time. It got to happen. I'm with you. Now we start breaking it off in different places on this planet. The RNA sequences of each one of the parent organization items in every one of the special variations is so vast of whether this tree or that plant or this flower or that fruit or that tomato, each one of them have a genome DNA sequence that's so unique. Now, what we're saying is over the course of this 150, 250 million, that every one of these parent species roll the good die at the same time, independently, by the way, on their own, stand alone in their own little space, somewhere in sub-Antarctica or sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere up in Mongolia. Another little one came up out of that zone on its own. Now we're having a trouble, and for all that to happen is it takes a lot of faith for me. And I could give up that argument before 2002 and the DNA sequencing that's going on here in every single varietal of creation at the subatomic level and everything. Now it's almost impossible for you to fathom that people are still landing on that. But go ahead.
Which study in 2002 are you talking about?
Well, when the whole breaking of the genome took place, now they're sequencing DNA. Yeah.
The Human Genome Project, like with Sir Francis Collin, who ran the Human Genome Project or headed it.
But even botanists,
right? And based on what based on the Human Genome Project, Francis Collin, who is a devout creationist, or devout Christian, I should say, he says the DNA evidence is enough to prove evolution on its own. But I don't know how much more time you have here. I know we've been going for about an hour and a half. As far as all these individual organisms, you were talking about each individual one had to be the right one. It's much less. There had to be one that got the mutation. It's more of you have populations. It doesn't matter if you're talking plants or animals or what have you. Just you have large populations. As long as the mutation isn't overly harmful, then it's probably going to survive. But if you have a good mutation and it continues to survive and be a good mutation out of this large population, these are the ones that are going to be bred with more often.
I understand the argument. We probably have to agree to disagree on that. That's all.
Maybe,
cool.
Yeah.
I think we have about 130 years of understanding, and looking back millions, hundreds of millions of years is kind of a fool's errand. But it's worth our energy for sure. And I think we're exploring new lanes right now. They're so fascinating. So it's good.
Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge to be had there. There's a lot of study to be done, and definitely we're never done with that, and it's fascinating either way.
Right? We should not be done with that.
Yeah. So, did you have any more questions for me? I know we've been going nearly 2 hours here.
Well, no, I've just really been appreciating your openness and just appreciate allowing you to share my story and the reason how I came to where I land. And I hope that it's inspired you. That I hope I'm not an anomaly. I don't think I'm an anomaly. I think there are many people like me, but they don't get the chance to even share this thing, or they're mocked, or they've been framed in some sort of a weird cultish type of practice in strange religions, and that's unfortunate. But you know what? I'm the same guy, man. I liken a lot of crazy people out there in their cultish type of thinking, and I go, I don't want nothing to do with that. That's lunacy. But I can't deny the reality of my relationship with the divine being. Just call it what it is. It's real to me, and story after story, day after day, I live in it. I live in it day in and day out. So if it's just me, then it's been a pretty good life living that way. If it's transferable, I would wish it on everyone to be able to live in such a way that the divine is so right in front of your face at all times. It's a beautiful way to live. And I tell you, the one thing that happens, Jake, more than anything, is the real treat to see each person in their eyes and engage with their souls, and wherever they're at in their thinking process and in their journeys. I see a lot of people that don't even look at a person and don't even look in the eyes of a person, and it's basically thought against thought versus soul to soul. And I think that's one thing that's come to me, is this love for all things, love for humanity, and all of its quirks and its brokenness. I did have a question in your YouTube. I mean, you had some people there. I mean, I haven't been able to see the YouTube comments, and there are
Yeah.
people saying, "How'd you find this clown?" Or,
Yeah, we've had a couple of people come in and say hi, but nobody's had any questions for us.
okay. Good.
Yeah.
Well, you've asked some great questions, and I think we've probed into some areas, and you've given me freedom. And I want to say thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate that. I really do.
And I really appreciate that you came on and talked to me, and gave your story. I guess you'd call it partly your testimony as far as the some of those experiences there, and I really appreciate it. It's definitely something that I want to foster, is this communication, friendly communication, less adversarial. I mean, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
I love the adversarial conversations. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, go. But we also need the just the calm questions, the calm answers, and the the nice conversations too. So
Well, I kind of when I was younger, I used to love the debates. I kind of stayed away from that because it turned out to be who read the most on the topic and had the one-upsmanship. And if I didn't have the answer or they didn't have an answer, one felt stronger than the other. Sometimes I felt like I won, and sometimes they felt they won, just because neither had studied the other person studied. So it didn't really mean anything other than uh, some intellectual exercise. I find a whole lot more trying to find out what a person's journey is, why they're in that journey, where their thinking is, and how that plays out. I find I have a lot more fun that way, and I appreciate the time.
yeah, definitely, I would largely agree with that. It's something you have to get to know a person individually to understand about them, and debates are fun, and I think debates are just as necessary as conversations, but go in understanding that it's not just about who got the most one ups or who knows the topic better. It's about
Yeah.
what's really going on in the behind there.
Well,
Yeah,
Jake, do you have like 2 more minutes?
yeah,
Okay. I think I'd be neglectful if I didn't say this, and this has nothing to do with proselytizing or anything of that nature. But I did mention earlier that I'm a Judeo-Christian, and that has to do with the person of Christ. And I talked about it's not really about okay whether you go to heaven or not go to heaven or whatever like that. But I do think that this is my story. Is when I found the story of Christ coming in, that was being a sacrifice for our brokenness. It had nothing to do with anything except for the holy meeting the unholy and saying, okay, I know you're not holy. I got you covered with holiness. And so I gave my heart to Christ, and I'm a follower of Christ. Now, saying that, I know a lot of people say, well, how can the good God allow multiple people go to hell because they have not received Christ? Great question, right? But people are thinking about this in a different way, because I believe that God looks at everybody and he's given nobody an excuse, because you can see through creation and see through history and all the things. You can see how God's made things glorious, see the divine in each person. So no one's got an excuse. You can see the divine in everything if you look for it. So no one's got an excuse. And I think that people, whether they've heard of Christ or not heard of Christ, or they've heard of a bad story of Christ, if they are seeking the divine, seeking the one creator, looking toward that creator, there's a place in heaven for them. Now, I also believe that when a person comes to Christ, it's like a marriage. And in that marriage, you're sealed with the Spirit that lives in you. Those who haven't received Christ, they have the Spirit on the outside, and they're always looking at the divine, looking outward. And you get little hits by the Spirit of God touching. But those who come to Christ say, I need to be connected, and the veil's lifted, our heart's healed, and we're in absolute marriage relationship with the divine. At that point, I believe that that now we're Holy Spirit, and the Spirit of God's in us with the mindset of God. And that's not for everybody. Not everybody has that. And so, will people go to heaven that aren't in Christ? Yes. But I think that we're supposed to be living more like heaven on earth. And I'm not sure if that's possible without that relationship in Christ. So that's kind of my take, and I want to thank you for letting me share that, because I would be really remiss if I didn't tell you that people can go to heaven without Christ, but most people won't go to heaven because they're not looking for the divine. They're not looking for the creator. They're serving other things. But when it comes to in this life being connected, it's only found in my mindset through I do covenant relationship with God in the person of Christ. And that's my take, and I'm sticking to it, pal.
I appreciate that. That actually goes into one or two of the questions that I didn't get a chance to ask. Is can you get to heaven without this particular doctrine? So I appreciate that. Yeah, as it's been 2 hours, and sounds like the kids might need a little help getting to bed. I assume they were asleep already. But again, thank you,
thank you
Pastor.
to your wife for giving you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, David, for spending this time with me. Give me the chance to ask you these questions. I definitely would love to talk with you again on some of the things that we brought up here. Just so much conversation can be had here. Now, you said you had a Facebook page for your ministry, right?
Yeah, Rock of Hope Edmonds is our church's Facebook page. It's also our YouTube.
Okay.
Edmonds. And then my personal one is just David Foster, and you're certainly welcome to friend me, and I'd love to connect with you again at your leisure.
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, definitely. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Anytime you'd like to have another conversation. This has been David Foster, Pastor David Foster, with Rock of Hope Baptist, right?
Well, I hate that, but yes.
Okay, we'll just say Rock of Hope in Edmonds.
You just lost your entire crowd.
But yeah,
that's right. Yeah, Washington, but we call Rock of Hope Church. That's what we do business at.
Rock of Hope Church, excellent. And
yeah, thanks.
Hey, yeah, get out there, meet other people, find people who are different than you, and build that empathy, and stay safe and stay healthy. Have an excellent night, guys.
Thank you, Jake.
Let me end the stream here.